Right, guys, time to go back again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. And welcome back to episode 25 of the Breaking Point podcast. Easy Mac and Lion Man joining me once again today. It's been quite the break from Call of Duty, gents, to be honest. These last couple of weeks have been somewhat dead, but we're back in action. Call of Duty to follow over the coming days. If you guys are enjoying the YouTube content, all that good stuff, drop a subscribe, drop a like on the video. Check us out on Spotify. Ratings over there have been phenomenal, so thanks for that. I think the couple of recent episodes that we did have been the highest rated over at the Spotify side of things. Lots more people enjoying it on audio platforms as well. So just beautiful stuff. Gentlemen, how's it going? Quite the break, Easy Mac. Did you have a good weekend, Austin? 4th of July, all that good stuff, and ready to get back into the swing of things in the CDL?
Yeah, it was definitely nice to have that extra week off. Was able to take time off of practice and just kind of relax. And now we're fully recharged and, going back at it for I think it's the three-peat, right?
Yeah, it would be crazy.
Yeah, the break's been nice because I feel like COD was a little bit oversaturated for those 4 stages. So, yeah, getting some time off, we actually get to, enjoy COD again a little bit when it comes back.
Yeah, I hope that's true. I feel like the last couple of weeks, people have just been watching, because I don't really follow North American sports, but Steve was telling me, the NBA playoffs or whatever are going on. Then obviously there's the Euros, and now it's getting back into summer. People are actually doing stuff again. You've got the Olympics coming up. There's so many things why and I've loved watching, regular sports again properly with fans and all that stuff at the venues the last couple of weeks. So I think COD's probably gone down the order of priorities for a lot of people, but it'll be back. Champs just around the corner. Speaking of that, of course, there's fans announced today, just right before we were recording this, for the major coming up for stage 5 at the same venue at Arlington. Don't know how, I looked up the capacity of the venue, it's 2,500. I don't know if they're going to max it out or whatever. I don't know exactly what the rules are going to be. It seems, Austin, that it's just Saturday, Sunday that the fans are going to be allowed to attend. The other days, Thursday. It seems like they're going to do the same schedule they did before, but just fans on the final 2 days, which seems to be a pretty good medium to me. As I say, don't know how many fans we're going to get, but great to see that we're back in action, to be honest. It's Texas, of course. They do things a bit differently over there right now, but certainly hopeful. At least if this has fans, then champs should be a lock-in.
Yeah, so I would expect the Overwatch event that is happening at the same arena this weekend actually is going to have 50% capacity, so it would be 1,250 fans. So that's a good estimate for probably what they're going to allow for the CDL event at the end of the month. I'm pretty excited because being back on LAN, it doesn't change that much. It just makes it an even playing field. But having fans be really loud and rowdy, that's actual LAN. That's where the jitters start coming in. So it's actually going to be exciting to see how a lot of these teams go, and because this is the last run before champs, pretty much the LAN. So having fans there, it's gonna be a really something awesome to watch.
Yeah, and I guess 95% of them are going to be OpTic fans again, so that gives them a bit of a boost. But yeah, I just wonder what the protocols are going to be. How are you gonna? Does everyone need to have the vaccine, or is it just
mask? You have to wear a mask.
Oh, is that it?
It's not a United States thing, and it's not a Texas thing either. But it says you have to wear a mask inside the venue.
Oh yeah, because we haven't had COVID here, and properly had COVID since April last year. So I don't even know what it's like to live with COVID.
That's crazy. Yeah?
Honestly,
that's crazy to think about. I wonder, I obviously don't want to get into the nitty gritty, but it's gonna be interesting what happens because you guys, I guess, are going into winter, or it's kind of is winter already, or
yeah, it's middle of winter now. And COVID came back for a week, but only one person had it, and they had the vaccine and they brought it from Australia. And of course, it's an Australians, bro. They always love to screw up our lives.
That's funny. Yeah, interesting though, because yeah, I guess if you have to be in the venue with a mask, it's a little bit different. At the end of the day, fans are fans, right? It's great to see. I think the OpTic question is interesting because it's not like the OpTic guys have said, and to their credit, right? Because there was kind of some people that would have said, going back to LAN, they're like, oh, if the OpTic guys don't perform, then maybe they'll start talking about that. Okay, yeah, when the fans are back, then we'll perform. And to their credit, they seem to be taking the defeat in their stride, as it were, and trying to bounce back here. But do you think it's going to make an overwhelming amount of difference, Austin? Because going back to LAN really didn't make too much difference. We see individual players, maybe Slasher, Octane, these types of guys performing particularly better. But having fans there, even if it's not a full capacity, like over 1,000 fans is still a pretty big deal, especially when like a lot of them are cheering for OpTic and you're a player that's new to LAN playing against them. I think we might finally see potentially some of that discussion that we've heard about for so long now about like these players are gonna choke on LAN or whatever. That may finally happen. We might have some hamster moments, as Methods calls them.
I'm not too nervous actually because I don't think it's going to change that much because there's no fans on Thursday and Friday. So when players are getting their first reps in, getting the jitters out, by the time Saturday hits and there's fans there, you're like fully into the schedule. You've played a couple matches at that point if you're still in the tournament. So I honestly don't think it will change that much. It might help some of the more popular teams because they'll have a little bit more energy behind them. But other than that, I don't think you're going to see anything like too crazy just come out of nowhere again.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would just be cool for the stream to actually have, some ambience in the background. Did I just cut out a bit?
No, you're good.
No, you're
Okay,
good.
you guys cut out for me. But yeah, it's like on the stream, it felt like you said, I think a couple of weeks ago, you were saying the matches just feel like online, but with, the gameplay's a little bit different. But now to have that ambience with the crowd, I think it would be amazing. About time.
Yeah, well, absolutely about time. And I don't know if it'll make too much difference in viewership or whatever, but it just proves that, like, because COD's taken, obviously other esports have already taken steps and done LANs in different countries and whatever, but this is like some of the first LAN events with fans you're starting to see, at least in the US, right, back in business. So it's cool to see, no doubt. And some teams that we may well see make some changes. There's been some talk these last few days about some of these rosters making some role changes. We've seen Octane came out in a video with Kenny. It was like a 1v1 type thing. And he said, he's going to be considering using an SMG. And I wasn't really sure if that was just like he was joking around or whatever. But then a couple of days later, we've got a Nubsy talking about it and saying people are going to be shook about the whole situation. So not sure exactly what's going on with CDL Surge right now. Of course, they're in a very tough spot, Austin, is like, what do we really do for the rest of the season? That's obviously a big question mark. Initially, when I heard this, I was like, okay, is Octane just going to be using the SMG on Apocalypse, for example? And that's kind of going to be how it is? Or is it, Gunless maybe is on the AR? Because we saw Crimsix a fair bit use the assault rifle or use the SMG, sorry, like in a 3 AR setup or 3 SMG setup that Dallas had when they played it. So really confusing. I don't know whether we're going to see this in fruition. Maybe they're just trolling on the timeline. But certainly a lot of talk about role changes within these rosters.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be like a full-time SMG by any means.
Yeah, no way, right?
I think he's just talking about how he's going to be using the SMG maybe a little bit more on Apocalypse as that third SMG, or sometimes in Garrison Control you can flex onto the third SMG, which I don't know how it will go. I thought Gunless was doing a really good job on that third SMG, but having Gunless on the full-time Krieg, especially on LAN, I guess maybe they're just trying to switch it up, bring a little bit more energy in. So who knows? Octane's always been pretty good with all weapons, so it's not too big of a change, but it'll just be cool to see, I guess, Octane be back in action.
Yeah, when was the last time he used an SMG? Because I don't think I've ever seen him actually play as an SMG ever. Like
full time, like
AR,
never.
Yeah, never. Right? Like it was.
He always jokes about Sorgtane, but like, did he ever actually use that properly, or was he just using it at League Play or something?
Yeah.
There's no way he ever used it for their starting roster, though.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's quite smart because at this point they've got nothing to lose, so you may as well try things out. And if it works, it works, So fair play to him, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just interested to see how it goes. As you say, there's nothing to lose at this point. It is just kind of strange because Gunless, especially I always look back to World War II and how good he was with just every weapon. And he's like, I'm pretty sure Seattle said that when they put him on the SMG in this game, he was particularly good. I mean, he had some really standout highlight moments like Garrison Controls, a map you mentioned, Austin. I remember a couple of moments with Gunless on that map with the SMG doing well. So I don't really know how it's going to work with Octane. Maybe he's feeling confident. Guess it is what it is. The other team in a similar boat is Minnesota, right? I don't know if they followed through with this because they were talking about whether they do it, whether they don't. I've seen Priest on stream using the 74U a fair bit, so maybe they are going to stick with it. But I think we talked about this as a possibility. A lot of these teams don't really have many options now. Like, there's no real changes to make. Of course, you can't make any changes anymore at this point anyway, even if you wanted to make roster changes. So it now comes down to, are we going to make some role swaps within the team? We see Paris Legion do this like every other week. Scraps is back on an AR or back on an SMG or whatever the case may be. So Minnesota seems like they're trying out Attach on the AR, Priest on the full-time SMG. Now, it's kind of strange in a way. I think that Attach has been probably underperforming somewhat on the SMG. Like he plays an interesting SMG style in that Standy really is just out on his own, and Standy plays very similarly to Abezy from my perspective, and Attach doesn't play quite like how Simp does to support him in that way. So maybe Priester can do a better job like that, and maybe Attach on the AR looks better. I always think that Attach's playstyle has kind of favored the slower play, kind of on that second AR. So interesting decision, Austin. If they are following through with it, maybe it'll work.
Yeah. Well, one quick correction. Technically, you still can make roster changes if they're on your bench. So let's say like Lamar could get inputted into the starting roster at any point. You just can't bring anyone onto a new contract. So that's just a little tidbit, because you might still see some changes with other teams in the future. Who knows? But Preston on the SMG, I actually like it. Attach was one of the slower SMGs. He plays at one of the slower paces. So putting him on an AR and just allowing him to use some of those power spots, it could work out pretty well. I always thought Dylan Attach should be running an AR anyways, but this late in the game, it's a big switch. So who knows? One thing to note is that Priesta, when he was struggling on the SMG, he had the team around him was completely different in terms of pacing. So this is like a brand new look for him, and he also has a Standy who's not really an entry SMG. He's more of a flanker. He's more of like that slow, methodical player. So Preston can really plug into that entry SMG again and just see if the pacing around this time makes sense and works well as a team. So it'll be definitely interesting to see if they stick to it, because they're pretty much guaranteed in the champs. So maybe they're just using the stage to get used to that combination and then banking on that, leading to success at champs.
Yeah, and like Priester, when he played as an SMG, the last time he played as an SMG, it was, I guess, Atlanta FaZe, right?
Well, he was the main SMG for the first two stages of this year.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, yeah. But he's always, to me, been more of an SMG player, especially when you look back at Black Ops 4. He was probably a top 5 player in that game on an SMG. So it's quite a nice move. And then Attach, seems like he's been struggling a lot in SND, especially like for the last stage, he had a 0.5. And it's like maybe they just want more security with him with an AR playing power spots and SND. So we'll see. His respawn hasn't been too bad. But you're right, he is more of a slow, methodical player. He isn't that fast entry sub at all. He likes to play, spots where he can guarantee himself a kill and be more effective in that way. But yeah, we'll have to see. I'm not too sure about how it's going to work. I feel like, yeah, they just need to get the SND together, because I remember early in the before stage 4, we were like confident that they would be a top SND team, and that just ended up being like one of their worst modes. So it's like, yeah, maybe they're just trying to switch things up there and be more consistent in that mode.
Yeah, it's kind of strange how that's worked out in a way. And yeah, I agree on the take, really, because Priester, the concern has always been, to me, what I said at the start of the season when he was going to be on that like primary SMG, was that one of Priester's one of the major benefits he has as a player is that he's incredibly versatile, and he's shown it over several different titles. In this title, like looking back on it now, being versatile isn't really that important, because there's not many maps that you have to switch things up on. So just get good with one weapon and you're fine. So that's probably why that was my initial concern about having Priester on the SMG as opposed to the Flex, as it now is kind of just a second AR, was that you'd lose the versatility inherent within the team. But now you probably don't lose that. And the Search and Destroy, though, is a big question, because I think the standings right now, Minnesota are in a good spot, because I'm pretty sure that the top 6 at champs get to go to winners, and the 7th and 8th like start in losers, which is not, I don't think that's been announced yet, but that at least is what people are talking about on the timeline and the hints that we've been having. And if that's the case, then Florida are currently in 8th, LA Thieves are currently in 7th, and I think Thieves are like 20 points or something behind Rokkr. So they really have to try and leapfrog them this stage. And unfortunately for Thieves, they're not in the group with Minnesota, so they can't beat them and catch up that way. So Thieves have a lot of work to do, but also Rokkr, like, they have a lot on them to just solidify themselves a top 6 place right here, and they're in a decent spot to do so. But winning Search and Destroy's early part of the season, Austin, was where they had most of their success. They were beating, I remember they beat Dallas in the game 5. It was Garrison Search as it was at the time, right at the start in stage 1. They got obviously plenty of upset victories, I suppose, in game 5 fashion. That's where they found their results. They barely win series that don't go game 5, it seems, which is obviously a concern, but especially when you're not winning searches. And that's what we talked about when Maniac came into this team, was like his search has been impeccable his entire career, especially in the Challengers region earlier this season. Hasn't really translated to the Pro League as of yet.
Yeah, I think it's really weird that their SD hasn't like gelled as much as I thought it would. I think they just have a lot of I feel like not everyone's on the same page in the mode, and they're trying to like change like play styles, and I just feel like some players are more uncomfortable than others, and players are just not in their preferred locations on the maps, like the power spots that they want to be in. So it's either they just got this switch of a role could really help in that. So then you free up Dylan attached to play more of that passive role that he wants to play. Maybe get him kickstarted a little bit, and this will maybe allow Priesta to get into more of that entry role and try to open up more space for Standy. So it could definitely work out pretty good in the future, because they definitely need to probably at least finish this stage 3 and 2 and win at least like one match at the major to, lock in a 6th seed, assuming that LA Thieves or who's in 8th, Florida don't just win the event. So they just have to gel a little bit and just start working towards the future here. And just do the bare minimum to get past.
Yeah, I don't have much to add on that, but I just wanted to add on Priesta with the SMG and SND. Like, he plays like a lot of critty angles. He's very sneaky. He's a sneaky little man, and so like I feel like that was actually going to help them a lot. And like I touched on before, I think attach would probably improve. There's no way he drops a 0.5 again. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, that was shocking to me when I saw that on the stat cards, right? That was his search KD, right? Like 0.5 or something in search, the entirety of stage 4.
They just have to get him and Major Maniac into more clutch situations instead of just like blowing out rounds. So what I mean by that is like Preston and Sandy just have to work more in the early rounds and getting those opening picks and winning those opening duels. So then you get into the 2v2s, 2v1s, like stuff like that, where your clutch play style can work, because that's something these guys have a lot of. So it feels like when they're blowing out, when they're getting blown out, they're losing really bad in the early round, and they're not giving themselves to a chance to use what their advantage is with this starting 4.
Yeah, that's a great point, because that's what we always talk about with attach, right? Like, put him in a clutch 1v1, 1 versus 2. Like, he's going to win 65% of his 1v1s, it seems, which is obviously a big asset, but you don't see him in an awful lot of situations like that. So maybe they do need to play, maybe him on the AR helps, right? Because he doesn't have to go in first. He can just sit back, post up, and find himself in those situations. Maniac, I guess, is a similar player. So yeah, excited to see how that develops, really. It's kind of, I don't know if these role changes are kind of like a desperation move with no other moves to make, or just something to try out, but it's certainly a storyline. Speaking of storylines, Abezy had some things to say about you guys have been scrimming Thieves so far this past week, whether it was looking particularly good for them or not. I was speaking to Kenny yesterday on the channel, and he was saying that, look, yeah, fair enough. We didn't have the greatest time against FaZe and up against OpTic, but they did have a good time against the other teams and haven't been looking woeful in scrims, as has kind of been discussed, because even like Neptune came out right, did the 11 streak tweet or whatever from when Florida played them, right? So still, question does get raised, I think, initially when, especially we think about them playing FaZe and having a tough time in scrims. Of course, FaZe can make basically any team look awful. That is just how it is. But the SMG duo has been the question mark. Like, Slasher and Kenny, especially on LAN, I've got no concerns about them, like, dropping numbers. It's John and Draza that is, yeah, a questionable SMG duo. That's where they have to prove themselves. I think we talked about it before that, like, John has to just be phenomenal. I don't expect Draza to be dropping crazy numbers. I think he's just going to kind of do his job. So they really need like a Slayer. Like, they basically just need, like, every team would love to have Simp, right? But a player like that is kind of what they need. And if John can be that, then this team is very scary. But that's the question, right? Like, if they're having a tough time against the SMGs of FaZe and OpTic or whoever they're struggling against in scrims, then it doesn't necessarily give the best sign for Thieves coming into the stage, given we've just talked about that they need to have some pretty solid results to lock up themselves a 6th seed, right?
See, the way I look at it is, technically, I think they have like 2 SMG slayers, and what they really need is someone to step up into the entry SMG role and like do well in it. So how I've been breaking down like the roles is you have 4 players. I break it down just like in NBA, how you have 1 through 5, where 1 is a center, 5 is the point guard. I do 1 is your fast SMG, 2 is your slow SMG, 3 is your fast AR, and then 4 is your slow AR. And right now it kind of looks like they have 2 2s and then a 3 and a 4. And 3 would be Kenny. He's like the faster AR, and then Slasher is the slower AR. So someone has to step up into that one role, that entry role, that role that like Abezy is really good at, that Neptune has been really good at. So it's one of those 2 players is going to take a hit, whether it's Draza or John. But like one of them has to be okay with that, and it's not going to dent their confidence. I have pretty high hopes that Draza is going to be that player that steps into that role, and then John's going to be that number 2, that Slayer. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie, they struggled in practice, and some teams do worse against us in practice, but again, it's just practice at the end of the day, and it's not matches. So who knows how they'll be come game time. And honestly, like getting blown out in practice and losing a lot of maps, like that's just more film you can look over and see what you're doing wrong. So then when it comes to game time, you can actually implement the right game plan. So I wouldn't put any like danger lights on for them. If anything, I think they're brand new roster still. They're still learning. So they need just a little bit more time, I guess.
That's what I was going to say, is that they're still so fresh, especially John, like playing at that top level again. I just wonder if, they're going to have that confidence from these scrims to be able to play, the style that they want on LAN, because clearly it hasn't worked so far online. But yeah, you're right. I think I mentioned this like last week or the week before. It does seem like they don't have that entry player right now. And it might be because that entry player on every team does suffer with stats, and it does look bad on the scoreboard. And because of the amount of changes they've been making this year, especially LA Thieves, no one player wants to be that player that's not dropping numbers, because it's just, who knows, you might get swapped out if the team's not playing well. So, yeah, I think you're right. It will probably be Draza, because John was more of that roaming player, similar to Hook in a way. And so, yeah, Draza's probably going to have to bite the bullet, become the entry player. And I wonder if he's able to do it with effect, because when you're playing up against players like Abezy, who's clearly the best entry player in the game, like there's no doubt about it. He drops a 1.2 as an entry, which is ridiculous. And I don't think anyone can really compete with that. So it's just natural ability that Abezy has over these other SMGs right now. But yeah, I think it is going to have to be Draza, and we'll see on LAN, because what did you see in scrims? I actually probably shouldn't talk about that, eh? No. Don't worry.
Yeah, all good. Yeah, but we keep those under wraps. Just so FaZe want to go for their 3P, They want to clean house on the rest of the season. So yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know if you had anything to add, Austin, but like I think that was certainly the case. You could even look at Envy, right, in Black Ops 3, when it was Slasher John. Slasher was the main, JCal was kind of the flex, second AR when needed. You had John as kind of also, he'd use an HVK at times, but mainly an SMG, and then Apathy was like the fast aggressive guy. So they probably want to try and build a pretty similar roster here. That's probably what Slasher and JCal are thinking, right? Over there at the same organization, thinking, okay, looking back at Black Ops 3, what did we do so well? So they're probably going to try and do a similar thing. Something that I thought was very interesting that Kenny said yesterday when I was interviewing him was about let's just say Octane. So they said that before the season, they were looking at options. They looked at Priester was the main option they tried to get, but all the chaos went down with the negotiations, and they couldn't lock him up to sign in because they were getting bought out by Thieves, right? 100 Thieves were purchasing them, all this type of stuff. Went to Hector, all the chaos of that off-season. So they couldn't get Priester. They were also looking at Gunless. They were even looking at Octane. And I asked him, can you see Octane and Slasher on a team working together in 4v4? Because he was he reckons they can, because Octane plays up a more post-up, I'll get you spawns, I'll sit in the hill type role. Slasher's a more aggressive AR. So I can see how that complemented them very nicely indeed in 100 Thieves in Black Ops 4. But I think a lot of people's perceptions has always been in 4 versus 4, it seems too risky to try. That at least is my perspective. But Kenny clearly seems keen to team with Octane potentially in the future. Whether that's with or without Slasher, who knows? But that's something that they said they considered going into this season, was having Kenny on a full-time SMG and having Slasher and Octane on your ARs. And look, if Octane's willing to start running SMGs now from time to time, then maybe it could work. But it just seems like a strange thing to try. I mean, Los Angeles Thieves aren't one to shy away from risk, though, that must be said.
It's a lot of talent within that trio. For that to work, though, there's a lot of variables, like who the fourth is. In my opinion, it's going to have to be someone like faster on an SMG, just because for Kenny to do well on an SMG, obviously World War II, he was a star SMG, but before that, he was an AR in Advanced Warfare. He was an AR in Black Ops 4. He was an AR in Modern Warfare. He's an AR this season. So I do like Kenny's obviously very versatile. He could run an SMG, but for him to do well in SMG, I would like him to be in that Slayer, that methodical role, not the entry role. So if they do go down that route, they would have to find an entry player who's really selfless, that can take criticism and that just like plug and play into that lineup. It would be very interesting to see how the Slasher and Octane dynamic would work. That's also something that a big variable in that, like who's doing the dirty work, because you can't get into a situation where 3 players are focused on slaying and focused on like hill pressure, and then that one person just has to do all the dirty work. So one of those 3 players would just basically have to give up individual statistics for the betterment of the team. And it would just be interesting to see how that would go in a team dynamic.
Yeah. For an entry player that would work on that team, who do you have in mind? Because someone who stood out to me this year was Vivid, who's just extremely selfless, but he plays for damage, plays for entry. But they don't seem to have that at all right now, and that seems to be their biggest problem all year. With Octane, I don't know if he should be playing like a SMG AR long term. I think for now, if he can just see if it works, and then is it like almost confirmed that he's going to LA next year?
Well,
Like
no, but like when I asked Kenny
kinda.
about it, he was like, "Yeah, I don't have anything more to say on that." Like he was like, "Maybe there's been some discussions there, let's just say." But
If he had a list of teams he would want to go to, I would imagine that's probably on the top.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
would be like the old 100 Thieves. It's 3 of the 5 that were on that team in BO4, so it'll be quite nostalgic as well. But
I hope it's a
yeah,
slow game. That's what I'll say. They got hope it's World War II V2. Then it could be pretty
yeah,
good.
because all 3 of those players were amazing, especially Slasher and Kenny on that game. And if it is similar to World War II, Vanguard is, then I think Kenny will slot straight in, because that's pretty much where he had his come up in World War II. But yeah, you're right mentioning the fact that he hasn't really played SMG in that long, and it does take more than just slotting straight back into a role. You need to actually spend a lot of time working on different routes, working on your timings, everything to actually slot in and be an effective SMG straight away. So the roles are completely different in this game when you play an AR and an SMG. So I wonder how well that transition is gonna happen, because he hasn't been like a showstopper SMG since World War II. And that's, I mean, coming into the next game, that's going to be 4 years ago. So,
I will give them credit though. They're usually pretty self-aware when they're scouting. If you guys remember in Black Ops 4 when they had Octane, Slasher, Kenny, and I think it was Enable already, they were trying to look for a replacement for Pharaoh, and they were looking at Dylan Cod and then Priesta, who are both entry SMGs, really aggressive. So a sleeper pick, if like hypothetically, if you had Kenny, Octane, and Slasher, a sleeper pick for me would be Asum to plug in there. I feel like he's really selfless. He's that aggressive, like SMG. He's also really positive, which in a team that with those 4 players would have immense pressure on them always to perform. I feel like he would be just like what Preston was in their Black Ops 4 team and Crowder, like a breath of fresh air that kind of reinvigorates the team when they get down. So he would be a nice sleeper pick for me, honestly, to slot into that hypothetical 3.
I don't even think that's a sleeper pick. I think he's probably the best entry sub in the whole game, like with all that he brings and tangibles and all. So I think, that would be amazing. But what are the chances that he leaves Clayster and New York and Hydra and what they're building over there? I don't know if it's too
That's
likely.
the thing, right?
I mean, roster mania is crazy, so
Yeah,
no one.
You never know. They throw the bag, They've got plenty of that over there.
Yeah, if they already have like a core three that is, Octane, Slasher, and Kenny, it would be very enticing to move. But it's like almost moving sideways with his team he's got right now. It's such a good team, and they have a lot of potential to, keep this going on for the next couple years. But yeah, I'm not too
He's
sure
like a
about
pretty
that.
loyal
But,
guy as well. I mean, the other pick I'd throw in there would be Standy because I think that he could probably do a similar thing. Like, not only can he be great on an entry sub, but it also does seem like those type of players that's breath of fresh air, as you described it, Austin, right? Like, kind of relatively new to the scene, seems a very upbeat kid. At the same time, they're like Rokkr also have a fair bit of cash. They probably are looking at Stanley and thinking, all right, we've done a great job scouting him and bringing him in. Like, we don't just want to sell him to Thieves. So you've got to ask questions of Thieves. Also, if you're Thieves, you got Hook on the bench, you got Venom on the bench, you got TJ on the bench. Like, you've got all these players, especially if it's World War II Vanguard, right? Like, TJ's obviously underperformed the last couple of seasons, but there's no doubt that him and Kenny were like the best two SMGs in that game. Which maybe is a relevant factor. So there's a few things to consider if you're Thieves. Of course, they're hoping this team works out. Personally, I'm not so convinced. I really don't know what's going to happen here in the off season because, seems like some of these other teams down low have just given up, and I wouldn't be surprised in the last couple of stages here that we see a lot of players just straight up playing for stats and playing for KD to try and get themselves preserved onto their current teams or picked up by another one at least. I know you've got to head off in a second, Austin, but I'll throw it to you if you're still about.
No, I'm good for like another couple of minutes. So if we have another one we can touch on, I'll be able to.
Yeah, super.
Crack on.
Yeah. You're good. Yeah, I was just talking about I guess players playing for statistics or whatever to try and keep their spots around on some of these rosters.
Yeah. I hope that doesn't happen. That's a big like red flag with the format that we currently have is when you get into a situation where you're like LEG, Seattle, Paris right now, London, where your hopes for the playoffs is very bleak. Hopefully we don't see just like all fundamentals go out the window and just like clear as day, just stat padding going on. I don't think we will see as much of that as people think, but that would be a definite big drawback if that does happen. But I do think they have to kind of look at it in the future to maybe have one more tournament after the playoffs, so we at least have teams continuing to push till the end of the year.
Yeah, we actually touched on that last week. But Austin, I wanted to bring this to you. What would you think of like a COD World Cup with teams from different countries as like a tournament after playoffs?
I think that would honestly be the best solution to what the current problem is right now. Obviously, COD Champs is not like I hate that they're continuing to call it COD Champs because they're kind of trying to. It's not. They're just trying to keep it similar to what it was in the past in terms of like name and recognition. In reality, it's the playoffs. They should rebrand it into something around that so people understand the difference because it's a big difference. Like we had a playoffs in Black Ops 4, and this system, what we have right now, is very similar to that. And if they threw in a play-in, like the 9 and 10 teams play against the 7 and 8 teams, if like in a lower bracket matchup, like that would be nice. But I do think if we could have a World Cup, that would be a perfect solution to having amateurs compete with pros. Because you're never going to see amateurs compete against professional teams in a franchise league. It's just not how it works. So a World Cup is a perfect solution to that. So there's no franchises, there's just countries. So an interesting way around it would be to do that. And I really do feel like we could get 24. You could probably get like 20 countries, and then you can do like a couple multiples of like England, US, and Canada. And I think it would work out like pretty amazing, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. But what are the chances that happens? Probably nil. But you added
Overwatch has one. Overwatch has a World Cup. So honestly, they just did it last year, and their World Cup honestly sets like viewership records. And I think the US team beat the Korean team. And so I can't remember off the top of my head, but it did amazingly well. So honestly, there is a pretty good chance we could see that in the future.
Yeah, there's a market for it for sure.
That is awesome to hear. Have you got to head off, Austin, or can we?
Yeah, I gotta head out, guys.
Yeah, all good.
All good, mate.
Been a pleasure.
Have fun, guys.
Yeah, we'll do. Enjoy dinner.
See you guys next week.
Cool, some great
Right.
discussion there. Me and Lion to finish off the job. The next thing, kind of on a similar vein, actually, talking about academy teams and or at least challenger players outside of the league, was Los Angeles Grillers didn't have the best time this week in scrims. We've been talking about a few of these teams, and I know, Lion, you do like to bag on them, which are understandable, especially in this case. And yes, this is practice, right? But it's got to be one of the more embarrassing things I've seen so far this season that Los Angeles Grillers got destroyed 8-0 in scrims by their own academy team, of which they recently dropped Chino to and picked up Mental. They then get completely destroyed in scrims. One of the maps was 250 to 11 on Apocalypse
Nice.
Hardpoint, from what we saw. Yeah, voice messed up, but whatever. We dive on anyway. Yeah, it wasn't pretty, right? So it's like, what's going on? What do you even do? How is this happening? Do you just swap out the academy team for the pro roster at this point? Have you made a mistake? Is Mental actually any good? Like, if your academy team is destroying your pro team, it's not a good sign that, like, not only is your pro team just tragic, but also the management making the calls as to who should be on the starting team is probably getting it wrong. Yes, it's practice, but that is not what you want to see at Line.
Yeah, they got 12-point clubbed, mate. I don't think I've ever seen that before, especially with this scenario and with like myself calling them an upset team. Like,
yeah. That's
someone
funny,
commented and like called us out, and I was like, yeah, no. I'm actually just upset at this point, and it's like,
yeah, no, that was hilarious. Yeah, that
I
tweet
feel
was good.
sorry for them, man. Especially Cheen's probably laughing himself to sleep. Like he loves that. Far out. The
Yeah, I
man's
blame
gone
him.
straight back to challenges, and he's frying. But I think we knew that he was, while he was on the team, he was probably their most efficient player. He was playing very decent, had like a 0.98 for his time in the team. And for a team that's like not performing well, 0.98 is actually quite decent. So yeah, 8-0 in scrims. Did you get to see any of these maps, or did you just hear about it like everyone else?
Well, I just saw the scoreboards. I saw a couple of other
Yeah.
scoreboards from some of the controls as well, and I didn't see any control that went to 3-2. I just saw like 3-1, 3-0. So like, I mean, that's all I gotta say. I mean, like, this is the mind-blowing thing to me. 250 to 11 is like when Thieves got bodied by Ultra on Raid. That's like very much a rotation-heavy map where you can string together 2, 3, 4, and like time on 5 as well if you do well, as Toronto did. And that was 250 to 14, right? So even that
yeah.
wasn't as bad as this. And this was on Apocalypse, which yes is kind of a similar
Yeah.
map, but you feel like on Apocalypse, you've got to get some time, right? Like rotate to P2, like P3's a bit mixy, like there's maybe
Yeah.
even, I don't know, I feel like there's more chances to snag a few seconds on, obviously like it scrims, maybe they just chalked it, maybe some player had controller issues, I don't know. But like, it's just, you don't see this really coming out of other teams. Yes, maybe they don't have academies, but it's rare that pro teams get bodied by challenger squads at the very least, let alone your own academy.
Especially since LAG Academy weren't really a top challengers team. They were like top 4, top 5. And so it's
Yeah,
like,
I don't know.
I don't know
Are
if
in the
they
elite?
should. Yeah, and like, are they?
I don't know. Austin
I
would know.
don't. Yeah, no, we're kind of.
Like,
We've
they're not
chalked the elite.
like, they're not like, they were never really considered the best.
Yeah, they weren't
amateur
like a
team.
New York Subliners Academy at the start of the year
No,
who were like
yeah,
frying
exactly.
everyone. And so I think it would be crazy if they did a full swap out, and I'd actually find that hilarious. And who knows, they might actually do better because goodness, this has actually proven things aren't looking too hot over there at LAG, and I think we already knew that.
That's the thing. Like, how can you even find the motivation to keep grinding on when champs is over? Like, you're in a tough group. Like, it's just
Yeah.
tough. But if you're some of those guys on the academy team, like, if you're mental, you've still got a chance to prove you're actually good at COD. If you're Nero, Exceed, these guys, you've still got a chance to potentially prove something. It's certainly interesting in relation to what we said last time about maybe having academy teams could be forced, or teams could be forced to have an academy or whatever, and then that could work. But I don't know how easy it is just to swap out your entire pro team. I don't even think that's really plausible, just because like the contracts that they were on get kind of awkward. So I don't fully know, but it's something to be kind of funny because at this point, if I'm LAG, I'm just trying everything. Like, try and find some player on my academy that I actually might want to build around. Because we saw a lot of teams last season. Paris, for example. I don't know if did LAG just chalk absolutely everyone? They might have done. There was, I mean, Seattle basically got rid of everyone apart from like Octane. So a lot of teams at the end of last year just axed their entire squad. And if you're LAG, you've got a stage to figure out who you actually want to build around and who actually wants to stay. Because they've got a fair bit of cash over there. They could actually make some money moves this offseason. Like, I was thinking if Slasher didn't go back to LA Thieves starting lineup, I was thinking LAG could put in a good bid for him and try and let him build something over there. So I think they have, first of all, they have to look in a completely different direction with how they're building rosters. This isn't the way to do it. But if you can find one piece on the academy squad that you fancy building around, like, I think that's a victory, to be honest, given the state of their season right now, Lion.
Yeah, I would love to see Chain be that player just because he hasn't had that. He hasn't had like a solid squad that he could grind with in the Pro League since TK or Envy, I guess, at the second half of World War II. So it's like he keeps getting thrown to the dogs, trying to fix teams, and he does well and doesn't get the shine that he deserves. So, you know, and the fact that he's gone back to this elite team and then week one, they're already frying is kind of crazy. So, yeah, I think LAG just, they need a full reset because it's just not working at all.
You just got to find an SMG talent, you know? Like, that's
they had
the issue.
one in Vivid and dropped him.
Well,
that was, he was the only player they kept from last year, isn't he? Like, he's the player that they brought back.
That's right. That's
right.
it.
And then they dropped, well, technically he benched himself, but they dropped him. And
well, I think I think the team, to my knowledge, the team basically just told him to go away because he wanted to make a change, and he was like, well, if it has to be me that makes a change, then so be it. And then whoever was just like, yeah, all right, you're out. And they sold
essentially, he wanted to like drop multiple players and then bring in other players around him. And that probably would have been the right option, honestly. Like, looking now, in hindsight, that would have been a far better option. But now he's on Dallas Empire fighting for tournament wins, and they're still
yeah, exactly, right? I mean, can't say I'm shocked, gotta say, Lion. I mean, we talked about it last week, right? If you want to rank the best teams in the game, they pretty much rank in order of how good the SMG duo is. That is like your goal, right? And building around Chino is perfectly fine, but I'd love them to like, if it's Nero, if it's like, I haven't seen great things out of Exceed, I'm not gonna lie. I don't know how good Mental is at this game. Maybe he can improve with the right people around him. Options like that to try and find some like SMG, because going out and finding like 2 SMGs that are going to be coherent and are going to try and beat Simp and Abezy for tournament wins, I mean, it's going to be tough, right? Like, there's only a few teams that can even hope of doing that, unless you make some big like moves in the off season, right?
Maybe teams should start investing in like really good scouts that can look into players, watch a whole bunch of matches and see what works. Because the fact that my cards even get mentioned for like roster changes is like ridiculous. And even I know that myself. Like, it's just dumb. It's just stats, and they can be like changed up and down. They can like players play for stats and look really good and then be trashed when they move into a different role. It's like maybe scouts is like the best option. Like really, really in-depth scouts that watch all matches, all scrims, that can really see who would work in a 4-man roster. Because it seems like no teams actually really do that right now, and it might be worth the investment.
Yeah, I think there's only a few teams I think that really try and do that. Like, I think Thieves are probably one of them. I think the FaZe guys keep a good eye on it, because I've seen even RST.
They don't need to, though.
A bit of challenges. Yeah, exactly. They don't need to, right? It's like, it feels like they're doing everything, and they don't even need to have a good idea who the amateur talent is in theory, but they still probably have a better idea than, you know, pretty much all the other pro teams, which is, I mean, again, it's a surprise. I mean, we can move on from that because there's a few other things to mention here. I wanted to talk about the OpTic side of things real quick. Because Envoy and Dashy, there was like a CDL piece of content they did. Pretty cool. Like, they sat down with a few of the players, I believe, at the major. I guess we're going to see more of that type of stuff over the coming weeks. And maybe it's kind of those like between match content they throw up on the stream. And also the next major, I guess we'll get similar things like this. But they talked about it. It was Envoy especially saying, like, it's not the pressure of the fans that gets to him so much personally, even though now they will be there in the venue, so that there's that to talk about. But it's also like, it's more so that other teams, when they play OpTic, just go balls to the wall to try and beat them, right? It's an interesting take, because even though OpTic aren't the scariest team in the game, they get an awful lot of respect in the bracket picks, let's just say. So when the groups are being picked, OpTic is always one of the very first teams to be picked, even though on performances, maybe they shouldn't be quite that high. But they always get a lot of respect, and everyone knows when they play OpTic, that's where the viewers are, that's where the interest is. There's a lot of, they probably go harder against OpTic than they do against pretty much any other team, which maybe is a reason why you see OpTic having a tough time. And maybe some people saw it talking this as an excuse, maybe some people saw it from another direction, but I thought it was interesting nonetheless about some of the additional difficulties in a way of playing for a brand like that.
Yeah, for sure. Other teams definitely pop an extra, game fuel to play against them, for sure. But there's also like give and take with that, because you're playing with this added pressure. Maybe certain plays you don't take, maybe there's less risk you take, maybe there's more. Like certain players, I think, thrive in that, and then some feel the pressure and don't perform as well. So I think those top teams who have experience playing against OpTic, like the Dynasty OpTic as well, like they know what that's like, and they can just perform. But then these younger players who aren't quite used to that pressure of playing in front of these, larger audiences, maybe they don't quite play the same play style, and that like works against them. So I don't know if that is totally fair to put on that other teams try harder, because yeah, they do, but it's possible that they play worse because of it. I think also, so we mentioned the pressure of the fans. I don't think it's pressure of the fans as well. I think it's probably the pressure of being on OpTic in general. And like, you're that hallmark of Call of Duty. You should be playing well, otherwise you're going to get bagged on by all the fans. And so it's like, yeah, I don't know. I think there's multiple different variables that come into playing for OpTic that do change their play style. But I don't know. I don't think it's that different. I don't know. I can't really speak from experience, but it's COD.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's not like an issue which really was raised in the past. Like I don't know if the Dynasty guys really thought that. I don't know. They probably weren't raising the question of, okay, other teams try harder against us, because either it wasn't noticeable or they just bodied them anyway.
That's too good, bro.
Yeah, exactly right. So it was a different era in that sense. And Scump kind of went into that because, as you were saying, like the fans. I mean, wow, the mentions are crazy, right? But Scump was frustrated the fact that he feels like individually he's been playing really well, but like he still gets bagged on by the fans all the time. Like I feel for Scump in that sense, right? Because of course he carries the name and the brand, and I think he's actually been playing great God. Like from what you could expect out of him at this point in his career, especially his search and destroy stuff, I think he's been a stand-up player for them, no doubt. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Checkmate is phenomenal on. There's so many great moments that he's had that just show like. Yeah, I mean, they call him the king for the reason, right? But what he was saying was that there's so many mistakes they're making. Every time they've lost a major, they've lost in very similar ways. And they've either lost he was talking about they were up 5-3, map 2 against Toronto at like stage 2 or whatever. They threw it away. They lost the series. The game 5 round 11, of course, versus Rokkr. There's been a few defeats. The most recent major that he, says, okay, we got kind of bodied, but, it is what it is. A lot of majors, things are going in pretty predictable, similar patterns, and he doesn't really know what to do to fix that right now. And it kind of, I don't know, it struck a chord with me, but I was talking to Kenny, and when he was talking about the OpTic Gaming Los Angeles team they had in Modern Warfare, he was like, there was these mistakes that happened again and again and again that they talked about from like month 1 of the game that was still happening in month 8. And he talked specifically about on Hackney Yard, like holding the green OE on that map, for example. And he basically was saying that like Dashy had made these mistakes at the start of the game. They kept talking about it and was still making the mistakes towards the end. Now, I guess Dashy happens to be a common denominator in this case. Not saying, obviously, pinning all the blame on him or whatever, but it's kind of interesting to see that now there's 2 seasons in a row where you've got players on those teams talking about consistent mistakes that keep happening over time, but they're not sure what to do to fix it. And Dashy's a common denominator on those teams. Now, I don't know if there's any more to say on that necessarily, but I think it's an interesting discussion at the very least, because Dashy ended up he went from one team to the other, and kind of similar trends maybe in those teams' trajectories, you could say, Lion, potentially.
Yeah, but then you also look at BO4 OpTic, and they also had those similar issues as they have now of being amazing against teams that aren't top tier and then struggling when it comes to the very top. And it is those small issues. And I wonder, I don't want to say it's Dashy, because to be honest, I don't know. I'm not in the team, I don't know. But it does seem a little bit fishy that when Dashy isn't playing completely lights out, like dropping 1.3s, frying, the teams that he's on don't perform that well. But that might just be because he's so good when he's frying that they're outperforming. But who knows, eh? Who really knows?
Yeah, agreed. It's always impossible to say. I mean, I saw Zuma have some discussion on stream about, we did talk about it last time, but is there anyone who's droppable on OpTic? And he was saying that like he reckons that everyone but Scump is droppable. I'm not necessarily sure about that. I don't know if like because I think Envoy's next up. I think that Dashy's probably going to stay there. Like I don't know if like I don't know if Formal disappears just because I'm thinking Scump and Formal did split up in the past. To the maybe there's a world in which that happens. I kind of doubt I doubt it, but I just thought it was an interesting discussion. I don't know if you had any quick thoughts on that line.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before. It's like it's almost impossible to drop any of them because but it's not. It's weird, man. It's this individually they're so good, but together they just don't work 100% the way they should. And they've all built their brands on OpTic. They're all now like mainstays in a way, and so it would be weird to see any of them dropped because I feel like a few changes and they could be good, but we've been saying that for so long now that it's like, I wonder where they're going to go next year. I think obviously ride it out till the end of the season, but next year, if things aren't going well early on, maybe it's time to switch one out, but that would still be tough decision.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, leads well into this next bit really because Scump's been talking about World War II Vanguard right in the next title, and of course we well know that Scump in the original World War II that was probably his like worst year as a competitor, right? He didn't have a good time like outside of the game, inside the game. Still they weren't like the
Can I
worst
touch
team
on that
in the
real quick?
world. Yeah, sure.
That is because he was playing on like 200 ping from LA because he was living with his girl, and yeah, so he was having a tough time that year, and I feel like that's probably the main reason why that team didn't work that year. And so going into this year, if they're all playing in Dallas still and they're all working together, it might be a completely different story for the like Scump and Formal and all that. So just want to touch on that real quick.
That's a good point for sure. Like, I think he can certainly be a fantastic player in this game, but like in World War II originally, he didn't like the game. I think that was when like the public match content started to fall off, and I don't really think he made many videos that year. That's always been a thing with Scump. You can kind of tell, not always, but by looking at how, at least traditionally, how many YouTube videos he's made in a certain year kind of correlates to how good he is actually at the game from a competitive perspective, because he just likes playing it a lot more, making a load of content around the game. Nowadays, that's probably a little bit different because you have to probably put way more time into focusing on the competitive side of things and can't just roll through teams off talent like you used to be able to, while also putting up a video a day on YouTube, which is incredible. But effectively what he's saying is like he's not sold on competing until he actually sees what the game is looking like. We're guessing we're going to see some early trailers. We're going to see, usually the pros get to go and play like an early build of the game. Usually they play it and have very positive impressions, whether that's implied by Activision or whether that's their own personal perspectives. We certainly saw people come out after World War II. They played the alpha, right, and were like, yeah, this game's phenomenal, we're in for a great year. Maybe that wasn't fully the case. So it's tough to say. And that's the question to me, right? Like if Scump is basing his decision to play this game on some of the early stuff that he sees, probably not going to give him the best perspective of what the year's like. So like you probably have to play the game for a couple of months before you have an idea. And like if you start playing, you're probably not just going to retire in like January before the season started. Like I guess Zuma kind of did, but it was a strange circumstance. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on that. Like, is Scump going to be able to tell how good the game is, whether he wants to play it? And if he does decide to step away, then I don't probably see him returning. So I hope that he just decides, all right, even if he doesn't like the trailer or whatever he sees or whatever he plays, like that there might be a completely different experience to actually playing competitively in the game when you'll start scrimming and stuff, and therefore he sticks it out and has a great year.
Yeah, a lot of games though have been really, really bad for pubs. IW, for example, or I mean AW was kind of weird for pubs, but like the competitive side has been amazing and like played really well. And so I think he would have to wait until maybe after a first tournament to make up his mind. But I remember Scump saying when they were on the Dynasty, his perspective was it takes like 3 tournaments of not winning to like have issues. And it's like if they keep not winning, it might get to the point where he just, hangs it up. And I think that's been a talking point for the last couple of years since they haven't been at the top. And it's starting to look more and more likely that he's kind of going down that route and moving into the content side, because we know that if he did content, he'd blow up. Like, look at Zuma, and then Scump already has what Zuma has, but it's Scump. Like, the man is just talented at making content. He's already got millions of subs, like 1 million on Twitch. He's clouted, so he doesn't need this per se. And so if he's not happy, I would not be surprised at all to see him head straight into content. But I wouldn't mind that either. Like, it's been like difficult to watch, as you know, when I came into COD, I was a huge OpTic fan. Him and Nade were the reason I started watching in like 2014, 2013. And so it's like, you know, and so like it's hard to watch them lose and not be happy. And it's clear to see that this year has been one of the toughest, if not tougher, than World War II for him. And it's you know, what would make him happy would be being successful. And if that's in a different lane entirely and making content, then I think he should probably do what makes him happy. And so yeah, if he's not enjoying the game, or if the game's just not it, which, let's be honest, it's World War II Part 2. I don't really have the highest expectations. Then yeah, would not like be mad at all if he decided to move away.
Yeah, I'm nervous about World War II Vanguard. There's no doubt about that. There's a lot of rumors that come out, and I agree absolutely. Like, whatever makes him happy, you should go ahead and do. I wonder if, because at the end of the day, in COD, he's basically achieved everything. At this point, he's just playing to, I guess, because he really enjoys competing, he loves winning, and for all those fantastic reasons. And I'm sure, like, he still has more that he could achieve within the competing space. But at the same time, it's you know, when FaZe were as good as they are, it's just tough. It's just tough as it is right now. So, a couple of things before we finish off. I wanted to go through and do some ranking for some players. So, this is what Chrome was talking about this past week. There was like top 5 SMGs, that is a question, and then top 5 assault rifles. So I guess we'll start with the SMGs. There's a couple that I think are like, I would say are pretty much set in stone, that being Abezy, Simp, and Shotzzy, at least as of recent performances. And I guess this is SMG players in the game right now, we can do it as opposed to of the season. But I mean, I'm open for discussion on that one. And then there's a couple others, right? But there's like a load of players you could throw in here. Like, I think Scump's probably just on the horizons of it. I think that I think I would throw in Kleenex. I think he's very valuable to Ultra.
Yep.
You've got Hydra to think about, who probably deserves a spot in there given how well he's been playing. So
Neptune's been playing good.
Exactly.
Really good.
I think that's my top 5. But then you've got Neptune, you've got Standy, you've got a Seam. I know your thoughts, Lion.
Should I go from 5 to 1?
Go on then.
I'm just pulling up some stats. Hold on. So at 5, yeah, I'd put Hydra and ASIM is difficult because ASIM seems to be more of, well, Hydra seems to be the X factor. ASIM seems to be just a brilliant player in general. It's hard between those two because they're very similar, and we didn't get to see ASIM at the major. So for that, I'm going to put Hydra 5. 4, hold on, Kleenex. 3, Shotzzy. 2, Simp. 1, Abezy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think I would have basically the same thing, but I might swap Simp and Abezy. It's a hot take. I feel like people always have this discussion. I see loads of discussions, and people, I don't know, there's people out there that are like the Abezy, not the Abezy stands per se, but like they will always say that like Abezy, because he has a harder role, is like better at that role than Simp is at his role, which is, I think, a perfectly reasonable take. Like, it's tough to deny that, but at the same time, like, I just think Simp sees the game on another level. Like, Abezy makes mistakes sometimes. His gun skill is outrageous, but Abezy will sometimes overchow and make mistakes. Whereas, to me, there's like a player, if there's a player in the game that makes like very few, if any, mistakes at all, it's Simp. So I think you can make the discussion either way, but...
but think about the fact that Abezy's an entry sub, and for the last stage, he had a 1.13 in hardpoint, a 1.18 in S&D, and a 1.15 in control. Like, as an entry, I think he's probably one of 3 like entry subs this year that has a positive KD, and that like is crazy because people compare like ARs and SMGs, and it's like you can't do that because as an AR you should be putting up at least a 1.1 to be successful, whereas he's putting up nearly 1.2s when he should be dropping a 0.9. Like, that's ridiculous. And so, should we move on to ARs?
I think that's a fair to do so.
Okay.
Yeah, ARs. So this is maybe harder in a way because I don't think it's incredibly clear what the top one should be in the same way as it is with the SMGs. Like, there's a few to throw in. Like, I guess we can consider the flex players that mainly using
Yeah.
it, like Celium, for example. Like I think you've got to
Consider them.
consider Celium in here, even though he's not like the main AR or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think people have been throwing in like Cammy. I mean, Crimsix basically says Cammy is the best, like straight up, which I was kind of surprised by, but I guess is understandable, right? He's been out of control. I think that Celium's got to be right up there. In terms of like main ARs, you're looking at. I mean, Crimsix wanted to throw himself in there at least on performances at the major. Maybe somewhat tough to do so, but at least at the major, he played pretty well. You could maybe put him
Amazing
on present form. Like I think that you wouldn't be out of your mind to do so by any means. I think Kroon played great at the major. Like Arcees, of course, deserves a mention, but doesn't really have to do too much. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that line? I need to get these players up, to be honest.
Yeah, I need to take a look, but if I was gonna include flexes, let me take a look. Probably Octane. Octane, you can't. It's impossible to really tell because his team does a little bit less on the map than some other teams, and so he gets kind of fed more kills than someone like Arcees. But I'd probably put Octane 5.
It's a hot take to me. I think putting Octane 5 is a hot take.
Yeah. Okay. Let me swap that around. I'm gonna put Wake 5.
Oh my god, yeah, Waking, of course.
Wake 5, Octane 4. 3 Insight, 2 Cell, 1 Cammy. Cammy's been playing amazing, and if we look at his stats on the last stage, he had, I think, in hardpoint, he had the most damage per 10 minutes with like 4,900, which is crazy. And then he had a 1.18 hardpoint, 1.15 S&D, and 1.1 in control. And and then when you look at his team, like Insight's got a 1.13, a 1.12, and then a 1.32 in control, and it's like these guys are crazy. And it seems like, how you mentioned most teams, their SMGs are the standout, and so that's how good they are. It seems like on this team, it's reversed. It's how good their AIs are, and then they have 2 incredible SMGs that can just do a lot of the dirty work. And like, it's a little bit different with this team because how Austin was saying earlier, you need to have the 1 and the 2. It's the entry sub, and then the more methodical moving around the map SMG. It seems like they just have 2 SMGs that play in tandem and can like take over maps, and then have these 2 ARs that can just lock it down and just play their role perfectly. But yeah, so yeah, Cammy number 1. I think that's pretty much unanimous at this point. He's been playing amazing all year, and even last year when he came in on Toronto and they won a homestand, like, yeah, Cammy number 1. I think it's pretty clear. But Arcees,
I agree.
Hard to know because he drops great KD, but it's like there aren't enough kills on the map for him to really show off how good he is. And he messaged me after I did the cards, and he said, hold on. He said, hold on. He said, I'm kill whoring. It's all your fault if I lose. And I said, lol, I want to see that. And he said, laugh my ass off. My boys are roasting me. But it's like, it's the same with Major Maniac last year on Atlanta FaZe. It's the SMGs are so good that there isn't much left for him to pick up. And so they just have to play their role correctly, and that doesn't show on the scoreboard. But yeah, I think he does have an easier role than someone like Octane, who has to pick up so much for his team to be able to win.
I agree for sure. Like, it's clear that Arcees is such a great piece in that team in terms of what he brings to the squad in general and the experience he has with them. But like, you could probably replace him with a lot of ARs and they would get very similar results, right? That's just how it is right now. So that's kind of why it's tough to know where to put Arcees here. I agree with the top of your list. I think Cammy, I think Cell. The bottom is so tough, right? Because I think the Insight deserves a spot here because he's been so good. Like, I think maybe 4th. I don't really know. Like, statistically, Dashy has actually been phenomenal. But I don't know if I can put him.
He's
like,
always had
results.
He's got this different level of like expectation from the fans because of his first season on a top team in OpTic and Black Ops 4. He had like a 1.3 for the whole season, and they still weren't super successful. And so like, I feel the expectation for him to be considered amongst the top players is to drop those like BO4 numbers, which is a little bit unfortunate because he has been playing great, but it's coincides with the fact that they haven't been winning.
Yeah, this is the thing to me. It's like, even with Crimsix, I can make a good case that he's, at least as of right now, like a top 5 player because he played great and his team was game 9 with FaZe to win, right? Whereas with Dashy, like, he makes great numbers, no doubt, but until they can prove that they can actually compete for championships, it's like, what is that converting into? Which makes it tough to put him on the top 5. I think that one that I'd like to put there would be Clayster for the whole season. I think that I might put him as fifth because he was really, really good at the start, and he was especially good at stage 3 when they made the final. So I think that Clayster, the entire season, might deserve a spot there. Yeah, outside of that, it's kind of tough, but yeah, I mean,
I was going to make a sports reference for Dashy. You don't watch basketball, I don't think.
Not really, but I know some of the names.
I don't think you'll know this one. So Dashy reminds me of a player called Bradley Beal, who's on the Washington Wizards. It's a player who drops like crazy points. He's an amazing player, but his team stuck around like 8th, 9th in the seeding. And so it's like you can't really judge him as a top player because these other teams that have players dropping similar numbers are winning and being like top teams in the playoffs. And then there's, this 8th, 9th team that isn't that good, but he's dominating. And it's like, that's how he feels to me lately. But if he was on the right situation, he could be that top player on a top team.
Yeah, tough. I guess I agree. Similar things with Formal, right? Like people have thrown Formal in the conversation, and understandably, like clearly his communication from what we've seen has been fantastic, but it's like until the results are there and the stats, then it's tough to argue. Yeah, I think that was a great discussion. To finish off, let's talk about the matches for this week. Incredible to think COD's actually back on the menu. It feels like it's been ages to me.
But it's good. We needed that break.
I agree. Sure. We needed the break. Well, here we go. I guess we can pick out some key matches that you're particularly interested in. If you bring it up on screen. And
do you want to go first week?
Yeah, let's just do the first week, I think.
Yeah.
And we can discuss it after that for the future ones. So yeah, I guess first of all, on the Thursday, OpTic Legion, I wouldn't want to see how that goes because I don't know. You have no faith in Paris, which is understandable.
That's interesting. It's interesting because OpTic this year, we really don't know what we're going to get. And so any matchup is important for them. But we've seen all year that they've been dominant against these teams that aren't really in the top 6. So it's that one. I just want to see if OpTic can come out with the fire. But if I was going to pick a game that I really want to watch, I think New York versus LA Thieves is the best game of the week. And that's on the Friday. Because New York finally getting Asim back after not being in the major. And then LA Thieves, it's the first time they're playing together with this roster. And I think that's going to be an exciting match just for those reasons alone. But yeah, what do you reckon? What's your most anticipated matchup? Maybe OpTic versus New York at the last match?
Yeah, I think that was the other one I was going to go for because it's a massive week for a lot of the teams. If you're especially in that Group A, I think like Group B is also kind of interesting, but the real heavy hitters are in Group A. And New York, when we were talking about the group, saying, okay, FaZe, probably New York, then Optical Thieves, depending on what happens in their matchup on the Sunday, or the final, or maybe it's the Saturday, I forget. It's like the final week, though, when they play. I think it's on the Saturday. But what that relies on is both OpTic and Thieves are 2-2 going into those games. So OpTic have to win the games they should win, as to Thieves. And then New York is kind of like the big question mark team to me, because I don't think FaZe are going to have too much trouble romping through this group. And maybe they go 4-1, they lose a series here or there, and whoever upsets them is, if it's one of the other 3 big teams, it will probably solidify their spot in the top 3 if that does happen. But New York are like such an interesting team because we don't really know what we're going to get. It seems they're in Texas now. They should be better with that without the internet difficulties they've had. But can they get to that same level? I've raised questions about their other game modes were suspect when maybe their hardpoint isn't going to be as crazy good as it was. So both these games for Thieves and OpTic, I think, are certainly winnable here. I think OpTic versus New York is going to be massive because if OpTic win that, if they've already beaten Legion, they practically lock themselves up winners because they'd only have to beat London at that point and to effectively guarantee it. So that's a series I'm really keeping my eyes on. What's your take on how New York are going to fare? Because it's technically their home series.
I mean, you made a good... well, no, screw that shit, bro. It's so lame. I hate that they still have the home series stuff. It's like literally just titled their game, but it's like, no, it's not your week, bro. To be honest, New York, you made a good point about them being, ASIM now being in Dallas, because that evens out their internet. They're now on even playing field with everyone online. And I think that will actually make a difference. But I want to know if they're really going to be that same team in Hardpoint, because that was their number 1 game mode. They looked amazing in stage 3 when undefeated, and then stage 4 they didn't really have that because ASIM wasn't there. So it's really impossible to know what team we're going to get from them, because all year they've been this team that we're like, maybe next stage they won't be that same force, and then they come out and they're just as good, if not better. So it all really relies on Clay, in my opinion, because he didn't have the best stage last stage 4. I think he dropped like 0.9s, and that was the first time all year that he hadn't really stood out as a top AR. So I think, when Clay's on a revenge tour, that man is almost unstoppable. So yeah, and especially against OpTic as well, because we know that him and Aches were the 2 players that could just take out OpTic at any moment. So that game is really exciting just because of all the storylines and everything that's possible in that game.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing with Clay. I think he is so crucial to that team. He's one of those. It's not usually that like an assault rifle player maybe is the X factor. Sometimes it's certainly the case. It's maybe not usually a main AR that's the X factor, but it's just what else he brings to the game. Like if he's bringing the energy like he was at LAN at stage 4, for example, that's going to rile your entire team up, especially the way that team is orchestrated right now. So yeah, I think that'll pretty much do it for the episode. Any final thoughts, line, as we get back into CDL finally?
I mean, not really. I want to see teams that like Ultra. I want to see them still perform at a top level. I want Florida to play like they should be able to play, and Neptune playing lights out. So yeah, I'm just excited for week 1 because finally we got COD back, and it's actually been a really nice time off.
Agreed. Been plenty other things to focus on and enjoy. So yeah, thanks all for watching. Leave a like on the YouTube video, leave us a rating on the Spotify stuff, all that good stuff. Leave us your thoughts down below. We'll be back next week, of course, to break down all the madness that has, I'm sure, ensued in first week of stage 5. Thanks for watching as always. Take care of yourselves, and we will see you next time.